Hello, my name is Loyer from i-nexus, and today we are going to talk about the Fishbone Diagram, also called by the name of its founder, Kaoru Ishikiwa. The Fishbone Diagram was invented by Kaoru Ishikiwa in the 1960s when Kaoru Ishikiwa created the circles of quality. The Fishbone Diagram became one of his 7 basic quality tools and was used mainly at the time to try to resolve issues when facing a problem. The tool was mainly used in Japan in the 1960s, and it became more international in the 70s and 80s with the communication of circles of quality concept. However, it is only in the 1990s that the tool became much more popular because it became a step required in the execution of most Six Sigma projects. In effect, in the measure and analyze phase of the project, most organizations were requesting black belts to use the Fishbone Diagram to start the root cause analysis. Today we will do 2 Fishbone Diagrams. The first one here will be looking at resolving an issue, and the second one on this side of the whiteboard will be what we call a reverse Fishbone Diagram, where you identify all components necessary to make a project successful. The first step in using a Fishbone Diagram is to identify the bones. We often refer to those bones as the 6 M's. However, you can customize those bones and call them whatever you want depending on what problem you are facing. Using the classic 6 M's, we're going to write those down now. First of all, we have manpower, then methods and money. In the bottom section, we are going to put machines, also referred to materials. And finally, metrics and Mother Nature. Please note that Mother Nature here refers to the overall environment and also the culture of a company. The metrics are everything to do with KPIs, measurements, and how you measure a process. Machines are the machines that you use. Those could be IT machines or any other types of machines, but also the materials that you use to run a process. Money is everything to do with budget or financial requirements. Methods is often referred to as processes, and obviously manpower is to do with people involved with the process. For this classic Fishbone Diagram that we will demonstrate today, we will use an operational example. The first step to do is to identify the problem that you are looking at, and this problem goes in the head of the Fishbone Diagram. Here, the example we're going to use today is service levels are too low. As you can see, the problem statement or the problem is in the head of the fish, and then you ask yourself, why do you have that problem? And together with a team, ideally, maybe on your own, but ideally in a team environment, and with the right people in the room, you try to identify the reasons why the service are too low. So let's look at manpower, for example. You could identify that there is, for example, lack of training. Another reasons why perhaps the service are too low from a manpower point of view is that there is low engagement of the workforce. If we move to the methods or processes, one of the reasons why, for example, the services are too low is that one example could be that the picking process in the warehouse is not very well defined. Another reason given by a team could be that the processes are too manual. From the money side of things, a reason why the services are too low is because we don't have a budget set in place to run this process properly. From a machines or materials point of view, perhaps we are using very old equipment. And maybe we are not digital enough. On the metric side, for example, we could have a cause that is no targets are set in place for this process, and that we have no daily tracking. On Mother Nature or the environment, reasons that could cause this problem could be, for example, that the customer has high expectations. Or maybe the team feels that there is no recognition from the management in this process. As you can see, when you run one of those workshops to identify the reasons behind a problem, together with the team, you try to identify in a brainstorming fashion all the elements, all the reasons why this problem exists. At this stage, if you are facilitating the workshop and trying to identify all the reasons behind a problem, a few points are very important to mention here. First of all, this is not a root cause analysis at this stage. This is a primary cause analysis. What we mean by that is this is your level number 1 of the reasons why a problem exists. All of those items here in the fishbone diagram are primary causes. Once you select the most important ones from this fishbone diagram, you enter into the root cause analysis. So first of all, this is primary cause level. Second point is if you have 10 items, which is what we have now here on this fishbone diagram, we then apply another principle called the Pareto principle that will tell you that in theory, 20% of the reasons why you have a problem will generate 80% of your problem. So out of 10 items here, only 2 will really make a difference in trying to resolve this problem here. So the best way to do, if you are a facilitator of a workshop, is to try to identify out of those primary causes here, which ones are the most important ones. As a facilitator myself, if I see 10 items, I will try to guide the team in identifying the top 2 items that we're then going to take to the next stage, which is the root cause analysis. How you do that? I like to use a concept called the multi-voting, where you ask team members to go on the whiteboard and try to identify with 3 votes what are the most important items for them in their view, with their expertise, that is causing this problem here. And I will typically give them voting rights, and those voting rights will be as following. 5 votes for the reason you think is the most important behind this problem, 3 votes for reason number 2, and 1 vote for the last one. So if I go on the whiteboard and I'm voting, I will basically just use a pen and identify, for example, that being not digital enough for me is my number 1 reason. So I'm assigning 5 dots to that reason. The fact that we have low engagement is number 2, so I'm putting 3 dots into here. And high expectation from the customer is number 1. Another team member comes in, and for that team member, the low engagement is number 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fact that we have manual processes is their number 2. And the fact that we are not digital enough is number 1. We have team member number 3 coming in, and that member believes that digital is the issue number 1 as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That we are too manual is number 2, and that we have no daily tracking is number 3, and so on and so forth. And by doing so, you use the expertise of the team members who come to the whiteboard and vote on the main reasons why this problem exists. What this will give you is very quickly, without having to do too much analysis, it will give you the reasons why the problem exists. By doing so, by the end of the exercise, you can then identify, in this case, for example, that being not digital enough and the low engagement of employees are the 2 main reasons why this problem exists. You then take those 2 primary causes into a root cause analysis. And the root cause analysis, as you probably know, the main approach, or my favorite approach anyway, is to use the 5 why exercise. You would then go and ask the team, why do we believe this problem exists? And identify a reason why. From there, why does that exist? And you break it down to different levels, if necessary, using what we call the 5 why approach, basically asking why 5 times to really get to a level of root cause analysis. And this is where we have root cause analysis identified for a primary cause, which is creating this problem. And you take action on those root cause analysis. So in summary, this is how you create a fishbone diagram. You create, first of all, the 6 bones, which here I've shown the 6 M's, but you can customize those if you want. You identify the problem. Why does that problem exist? Together with a team, you brainstorm on all the reasons why this exists. multi-voting to try to identify the main reasons why, and then root cause analysis, in this case on the top 2 items, or you can select more if you want, but again, applying the Pareto principle, trying to identify a root cause analysis for 20% of the items on your fishbone. Now we're going to move into the reverse fishbone diagram. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a reverse fishbone diagram, and as opposed to trying to find the causes behind a problem here, I'm going to try to identify elements that is going to make my project successful. And here I'm going to use exactly the same approach as in the fishbone. I'm going to ask myself how I can do that by identifying elements in the 6-bone diagram that are going to help me make my project successful. The fishbone diagram is very often used to identify reasons behind a problem like we did here, but it is not very often used to identify successful elements that are needed to make a situation successful. And this is why we call this the reverse fishbone diagram. It's a different approach to the classic fishbone diagram, and this is why also I represent it in a different angle to the classic fishbone diagram. So if we look at this and we try to identify elements that can help me make a project successful, when I've used this in the past, I've used exactly the same ends of the classic fishbone diagram and try to identify how, from a people point of view or a manpower point of view, I can make my project successful. Examples here could be project sponsor support. We could also work on establishing a communication plan. From a methods point of view, every single project needs to have a governance process. We need to think of the methodology we're going to use for the project. From a money point of view, the budget that is required to run a project. On the machine side of things, we could think of the tools that are needed by the team to perform the project. Another element could be IT access. The KPIs of the project, how we're going to measure success. Perhaps we could think of the vision, mission, and strategy that the project is going to take. As you can see, the approach is very similar to the classic fishbone diagram. However, what we are doing here is trying to identify successful elements that are going to make my project a success. This could be used for any reasons here or any topics. This is only one example, but just as we did for the fishbone diagram, what you can then do is identify what are the most important elements for you and your team to look at. And exactly as we did earlier on, we could identify by multi-votes what we believe are the most important reasons and try to identify together that, for example, the communication plan and the tools that we are using for the project are also going to be the most important one, and then break it down to the nth degree, just like we did in the root cause analysis, to try to identify the actions that you need to implement to run your project in a successful manner. So there you have it. This is the classic fishbone diagram and the reverse fishbone diagram and the approach and some tips on how to facilitate such tool. It is a tool that has gone a little bit out of flavor. Personally, I use it every single day pretty much to try to help me in every single one of my projects. I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please press like. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more whiteboard videos like this one. Thank you very much for watching and happy strategizing.